This 76-year-old man walked away from his home after accidentally hearing his own children say they were waiting for him to die so they could split his property. He wandered alone through a snowstorm on a deserted road, then suddenly collapsed on the freezing pavement. He lay there barely breathing with no one passing by. Just when all hope was fading, an old beat-up truck screeched to a stop beside him. A black family jumped out, lifted him up without hesitation, and brought him home to care for him. None of them could have imagined that this moment would become the biggest turning point in all their lives. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The snow fell heavy that December night, covering Highway 9 like a white blanket that stretched as far as the eye could see. No cars, no lights, just endless white, and the kind of cold that cuts through your bones. Robert Miller's footsteps left deep prints in the snow, each one heavier than the last. He was 76 years old, dragging a battered suitcase that had seen better days. His breath came out in white clouds that disappeared into the darkness. The thin coat he wore, the only one he'd grabbed before leaving, did nothing against the bitter cold. His hands shook. Not from the cold, though, that didn't help. They shook because his heart was giving up. He could feel it, that tightness in his chest, like someone was squeezing his ribs together, like his body was finally saying enough. Just a little further. He whispered to himself, though he had no idea where further was. He didn't even know where he was going. Away. That was all that mattered. Away from the house. Away from the memories. Away from the phone calls that had shattered everything. The pain hit him sudden and sharp. Robert gasped, his hand flying to his chest. The suitcase dropped from his other hand, landing in the snow with a muffled thud. His knees buckled. He tried to stay standing, but his legs wouldn't listen. The ground rushed up to meet him, and then he was lying there, face up in the snow, staring at the black sky above. The cold seeped through his coat, through his shirt, straight into his skin. His knee throbbed where it had hit the frozen ground. He felt the warm trickle of blood, though he couldn't see it in the dark. "Margaret," he whispered his wife's name, forming frost in the air. "I'm coming, sweetheart. I'm sorry it took so long." 7 years. 7 years since she died. And every single day had been like walking through fog. But at least then he'd had hope. Hope that his children would visit. Hope that he mattered to someone. That hope was gone now. The snow continued to fall, landing on his face, melting against his skin. He didn't have the strength to brush it away. Didn't have the strength to move at all. This is it, he thought. This is how it ends. Alone on a road nobody travels in a town nobody knows. Maybe that was fitting. His vision started to blur. The cold didn't feel so bad anymore. In fact, he barely felt it at all. That was a bad sign, he knew. The body shutting down, giving up. He thought about the suitcase lying next to him. Inside it, a few changes of clothes, a photo of Margaret from their wedding day, and that wooden horse he'd never finished carving for a grandchild he'd never met. The photo would get ruined in the snow. That bothered him more than dying did. Then he heard it, distant at first, but growing louder. An engine. Headlights swept across the field beside the road, getting brighter. Robert tried to lift his hand to wave to do something, but his arm wouldn't move. He could only lie there watching the lights get closer, thinking, "Please, please see me. Please don't leave me here alone." The truck slowed down. The engine cut off. A door opened. "Emma, there's someone here." A man's voice, urgent and scared. "There's an old man. Oh God, I think he's dying." Footsteps crunched through the snow, running toward him. Robert's eyes fluttered closed. Just for a second, he told himself. Just for 1 second. Sir, can you hear me?" A woman's voice, this time closer. Hands touched his face, his neck, checking for something. "James, he's barely breathing. His pulse is so weak. Should I call 911 inches? There's no time. Help me get him to the truck." "Emma, we don't even know." "James," the woman's voice cut through sharp. "We're not leaving him here to die." Robert tried to speak, tried to say no. "Just leave me," but the words wouldn't come. He felt himself being lifted, strong arms under his back, under his knees. The movement sent a spike of pain through his chest that made him gasp. "It's okay," the woman said softly near his ear. "You're safe now. We've got you." A child's voice, high and frightened. "Mama, is he gonna be okay?" "He will be, baby. He will be." Robert felt himself being placed on something soft, a car seat, he realized. A blanket was draped over him, then another. Something warm and small pressed against his hand. He managed to open his eyes just enough to see a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, holding his hand between both of hers. Her eyes were wide with worry. "Don't die, mister," she whispered. "Please don't die." The truck started moving. The motion was gentle, but each bump sent waves of pain through Robert's chest. He closed his eyes again, too tired to keep them open. He heard voices muffled like he was underwater. "Pulse is getting weaker." "How far to the hospital?" "No time will take him home." "Are you sure?" "What else can we do? Let him die." Home. The word echoed in Robert's mind as consciousness slipped away. He didn't have a home anymore. That's why he'd left. That's why he'd walked into the snow with no destination in mind. Better to die out there than die in a house where nobody wanted him alive. The darkness pulled him under, and Robert Miller let it take him. When Robert opened his eyes, he didn't recognize the ceiling above him. It wasn't his ceiling, the one with the water stain that looked like a cloud. This ceiling was painted pale yellow, with a crack running across it like a river. For a moment, panic gripped him. Where was he? What had happened? Then it all came rushing back. The snow, the cold, the pain in his chest, the truck lights. He tried to sit up, but his body protested with a sharp ache that made him gasp. "He's awake!" A small voice, bright with relief. "Mama, Mama, he's awake." A little girl appeared in his line of vision, her face lighting up with a gap-toothed smile. The same girl who'd held his hand in the truck, he realized. "Easy there," a woman's voice said, calm and professional. A woman in her 30s appeared, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a sweatshirt that said Mercy General Hospital on it. "Don't try to move too fast. You had a pretty rough night." Robert's mouth felt like sandpaper. Where am I?" "You're in our home," the woman said, kneeling beside the couch he was lying on. "I'm Emma Thompson. This is my daughter Lucy. My husband James found you on the road last night." "You were gonna die," Lucy said matter-of-factly. "You were all cold and not moving, and Mama said your heart was real slow, and—" "Lucy, honey, go tell your daddy he's awake okay." The little girl nodded and scampered off her footsteps, pattering across the floor. Robert looked around slowly. He was in a small living room, worn furniture but clean. Children's drawings covered the walls, held up with thumbtacks. A plastic toy truck sat in the corner next to a stack of blocks. The whole place smelled like something baking. "I should be in a hospital," Robert managed. Emma shook her head. "You kept saying no, over and over. No hospital, please, no hospital. So we brought you here instead." She paused, studying his face. "We found heart medication in your pocket. Nitroglycerin. That helped a lot." A man appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, with carpenter's hands, and sawdust still clinging to his jeans. "You're awake. Thank God." He crossed the room and extended his hand. "James Thompson." Robert shook it weakly. The man's grip was firm, but gentle. "I'm Robert Miller." His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. "Well, Mr. Miller, you gave us quite a scare." James pulled up a chair and sat down. "What were you doing out there? It was 5 below last night. No car, no proper coat." Robert closed his eyes. What could he say that he'd been trying to disappear? That dying in the snow had seemed preferable to dying alone in that empty house. "I was going somewhere," he said finally. "Where?" Emma asked gently. "I don't know." The words hung in the air. Emma and James exchanged a glance, the kind of look married people share when they're having a whole conversation without words. A boy appeared behind James, maybe 9 or 10, with the same brown eyes as his father. "Is he okay, Dad?" "He's going to be fine, Tommy. Come say hello." The boy approached shyly. "Hi, I'm Tommy. I gave you my coat last night, the one with the Spider-Man on it." Robert looked at him. This child he'd never met, who'd given up his coat for a stranger freezing to death. "Thank you," Robert whispered, and to his horror felt tears building behind his eyes. "You hungry?" Emma stood up, smoothing her hands on her jeans. "I made soup. Chicken noodle. Nothing fancy, but it's hot. I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not." Emma's voice was firm. "You're staying for dinner at least. Doctor's orders." She smiled. "And I'm a nurse, so I outrank you." Before Robert could protest, Lucy grabbed his hand. "Come on, we eat at the table together. All of us. That's the rule." She tugged gently, and Robert found himself being helped to his feet by James, who kept a steady hand on his elbow as they walked the few steps to the small kitchen table. The table was old wood, scratched and marked with years of use. 4 chairs surrounded it, mismatched but sturdy. Lucy pulled out one of the chairs for him like she was seating royalty. Emma ladled soup into bowls while James sliced bread. Tommy poured water from a pitcher into plastic cups, not glasses, Robert noticed, but the kind of cheap plastic cups you get at dollar stores. They weren't wealthy, that much was clear. The house was small, the furniture worn, the dishes mismatched. But when they all sat down together, something in Robert's chest tightened that had nothing to do with his heart condition. "We hold hands for Grace," Lucy announced, reaching for Robert's hand on one side and her brother's on the other. Robert hesitated, then took Emma's hand on his other side. Her hand was warm, calloused from work, and she gave his a gentle squeeze. James bowed his head. "Lord, thank you for this food for this family, and for bringing Mr. Miller to us safely. Watch over him and help him heal. Amen." "Amen," the family chorused. Robert couldn't remember the last time he'd said grace. Not since Margaret died, certainly. Maybe even before that. "Eat up," Emma said, pushing the bread basket toward him. "You need your strength." The soup was simple store-bought broth, probably with carrots and celery and those thick egg noodles. The bread was white plain. Nothing special. Robert took a sip of the soup and had to close his eyes. When was the last time he'd eaten a hot meal that someone else had cooked for him? When was the last time he'd sat at a table with other people? 7 years. 7 years of frozen dinners eaten alone in front of the TV. 7 years of silence broken only by the tick of the clock. "Is it okay?" Emma asked, noticing his expression. "It's perfect." Robert managed, and his voice broke on the last word. Lucy scooted her chair closer to his and started chattering about her day at school, something about a field trip to the science museum and a butterfly that had landed on her hand. Tommy chimed in about his math test. James talked about a cabinet he was building for a customer. They didn't ask Robert where he'd come from or where he'd been going. They didn't pry or push. They just included him, like he'd always been there, like he belonged. And for the first time in 7 years, Robert Miller didn't feel invisible. That night, Emma insisted Robert sleep on the couch. She brought him pillows and blankets more than he needed, piling them on until he protested. "Better too warm than too cold," she said firmly. "You had hypothermia last night. Your core temperature was 89 degrees when we got you inside." "I don't want to impose—" "Mr. Miller," Emma sat down on the coffee table facing him directly. "My husband found you dying in the snow. You think we're going to kick you out now?" She shook her head. "You stay as long as you need to. No arguments." After she left, Robert lay in the darkness staring at the ceiling. The house creaked and settled around him. He could hear low voices from the bedroom down the hall, James and Emma talking quietly. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was gentle, caring. His suitcase sat on the floor beside the couch. Emma had brought it in, brushed off the snow, and set it down without opening it or asking what was inside. Robert reached down and unzipped it carefully. The photo of Margaret was still there, protected by the clothes he'd wrapped it in. He pulled it out and held it up to catch the moonlight coming through the window. Margaret at 25 in her wedding dress, laughing at something he'd said just before the photographer snapped the picture. She'd been so beautiful, so full of life. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he whispered to the photo. "I'm sorry I couldn't. I tried. I tried to be a good father. I don't know what I did wrong." The photo, of course, didn't answer. He set it on the coffee table, propped against a stack of magazines, so she could watch over him. Then he lay back down and closed his eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time he started to drift off, he saw it all again, heard it all again. The phone calls, his children's voices, the terrible truth he'd overheard. "Stop it," he muttered to himself. "Just stop thinking about it." But he couldn't. The memories pulled him back, dragging him down like he was drowning. Maybe it would help to remember, to face it, to understand how he'd ended up here dying in the snow, rescued by strangers. Robert took a shaky breath and let himself fall backward into the past. 2 weeks earlier, Oak Valley. Robert sat at his kitchen table, staring at the phone in his hand. The house around him was silent, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, just empty. It had been like this for 7 years. 7 years since Margaret's funeral, when both children had showed up looking uncomfortable in black clothes, hugging him briefly before hurrying back to their important lives. David had stayed for 2 days, Sarah for 3. Then they were gone, and Robert was alone. The house in Oak Valley was too big for one person. 3 bedrooms, a den, a workshop out back where Robert used to build things. Margaret's garden still grew wild in the backyard, but Robert didn't have the heart to tend it properly. He'd tried at first, tried to keep everything just the way she'd left it. But after a while, it felt like living in a museum of his own life, every object a reminder of what was gone. He looked around the kitchen now. The table was set for one plate, 1 fork, 1 cup. The refrigerator hummed mostly empty, except for expired milk and some frozen dinners. The calendar on the wall still showed March, though it was December. He'd stopped bothering to change it. His chest hurt. It had been hurting for weeks, but he'd ignored it. What was the point of going to the doctor so they could tell him his heart was failing? He already knew that. But then the pain had gotten bad enough that he'd collapsed in the grocery store, and they'd taken him to the hospital whether he wanted to go or not. 1 month in the cardiac ward, 30 days of tests and medications, and doctors telling him he needed to take it easy, reduce stress, have someone check on him regularly. He'd called both children from the hospital, left voicemails, sent text messages that probably confused them because he wasn't good at typing on the small phone keyboard. Neither one had called back. Neither one had visited. The nurses had noticed. They'd been kind about it, but he'd seen the pity in their eyes when visiting hours came and went, and nobody showed up for him. On the day they discharged him, a nurse had wheeled him out to the pickup area and waited with him for his taxi, looking uncomfortable. "Is there anyone who can stay with you for a few days?" she'd asked. "You really shouldn't be alone." "I'll be fine," Robert had said, because what else could he say? That his children had better things to do than care about whether their father lived or died. He'd taken a taxi home to the empty house and sat in the same chair he'd been sitting in ever since. Then 3 days after he'd gotten home, his phone rang. Robert's heart had leaped when he saw the name David, his son, his firstborn. The boy he'd worked 2 jobs to put through business school, the one he'd been so proud of. He'd answered on the first ring. "David, I'm so glad you called." "Hey, Dad." David's voice was brisk, businesslike. "Sorry I haven't called sooner. Work's been crazy. How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm doing better." Robert had gripped the phone, tighter relief flooding through him. David cared. He'd been busy, that's all. "The doctors say I need to take it easy, watch my diet." "That's good. That's real good." A pause. "So the heart attack, it wasn't too serious." "Well, they said it was a warning sign. I need to be more careful." "But you're okay now. You're home. You're managing okay." "Yes, I'm home. It's a little lonely, but..." Good. "Listen, Dad, I just wanted to check in, make sure you were all right. I've got a meeting in 5 minutes, but I wanted to hear your voice." Robert's throat had tightened. "I'm glad you called, son. It means a lot." "Of course, Dad. You take care of yourself. Okay, I'll call you soon." David wait, but the line had gone quiet. Not dead, Robert could still hear background noise. David must have pulled the phone away from his ear, probably checking his email or something while they said goodbye. Robert had been about to hang up when he heard it. David's voice distant but clear, talking to someone else in the room. "She's still asking about him." David's voice sharp and annoyed now, nothing like the warm tone he'd used with Robert. "Jesus." "Yeah, he's fine. Unfortunately." Robert had frozen the phone pressed to his ear. "No, he sounds strong. Damn old man's too stubborn to die." A harsh laugh. "I thought this heart attack would finally do it, would have made everything so much easier." A woman's voice in the background, David's wife probably. Robert couldn't make out the words. Yeah, I know. We just need to be patient." David again. "Once he's gone, we sell the land and split it 50-50. Just gotta make sure Sarah doesn't try to claim more than her share. You know how she gets." The woman said something else. "I'll handle it. In the meantime, I'll keep calling him every few weeks, play the concerned son. Can't have him changing his will or anything stupid like that." The blood had drained from Robert's face. The phone had slipped from his numb fingers, clattering onto the table, but he could still hear it. David's voice, tinny and distant. "Trust me, honey, it won't be much longer. Old man's got a bad heart. Next attack will probably finish him off." Robert had lunged for the phone, jabbing the red button to end the call. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold it. His son, his boy, the child he'd sacrificed everything for, waiting for him to die, counting on it, planning for it. Robert had sat there for a long time staring at the wall while his heart, his failing, damaged heart, broke in a way that had nothing to do with arteries or ventricles. He'd thought about calling David back, confronting him. But what would be the point? David had made his position clear. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Robert had heard wrong. He'd almost convinced himself of that when 2 days later Sarah called. "Daddy." Her voice had been bright, cheerful. She'd always called him Daddy, even now at 42 years old. "I heard you were in the hospital. I'm so sorry I didn't call sooner. It's been absolutely insane at the firm." Sarah was a lawyer. A good one from what Robert understood. She made more money than Robert had ever seen in his life. "It's okay, sweetheart," Robert had said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know you're busy. How are you feeling? Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm trying. It's hard to cook for just one person, you know. Everything comes in portions for families." "Oh, Daddy." Sarah's voice had softened. "You know I've been thinking. You shouldn't be out there all alone. Not with your health." Hope had flickered in Robert's chest. Was she going to offer to visit, to stay for a while? "What if you came to live with me?" Sarah continued. "Here in the city. I've got that spare room. It's full of storage right now, but I could clean it out. We could get you set up really nicely." "Oh." Robert had been surprise touched. "Sarah, that's very kind, but I couldn't impose." "It's not imposing. You're my father. I want to take care of you." A pause. "And honestly, Daddy, that house is way too big for you. All those stairs, that huge yard. What if you fell and nobody found you?" "I manage okay." "But you shouldn't have to just manage, Daddy. You should sell the house. And the land god, that property must be worth a fortune now. Real estate values in Oak Valley have gone crazy." There it was. Robert's hands had tightened on the phone. "The land it's where your mother planted her roses," he'd said quietly. "Where we raised you kids. It's not about the money." "I know, Daddy, I know. But what are you going to do with it? You can't maintain it by yourself. And think about it. If you sold it, you'd have plenty of money to get really good medical care. You could afford a nice assisted living place or live with me and actually have some comfort in your retirement." "Sarah, just think about it. Okay, don't make any decisions right now, but really consider it. That land is worth a lot, and you're just sitting on it. It doesn't make sense." Robert had closed his eyes. Do you remember when you were little and we'd have picnics out in the meadow?" "Of course," Sarah's voice had brightened. "Those were lovely. Your mother made potato salad. You hated it, but you'd eat it anyway because you didn't want to hurt her feelings." "I remember. You used to say you'd build your own house there someday, raise your kids where you grew up." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Daddy, I was 8 years old. People change. I have a life here in the city. I'm not going to move back to Oak Valley." "I know. I was remembering." "Well, that's sweet, but we need to think about practical matters. You're not getting any younger, and that property is just sitting there. It's not doing anyone any good. Not doing anyone any good. I need to go, Sarah. I'm tired." Of course. You rest. But think about what I said. Okay, I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, sweetheart." He'd hung up and sat there in the kitchen of the house he and Margaret had built together and understood with perfect, terrible clarity. His children didn't love him. Not really. They loved what he represented: an inheritance, a payout, an asset to be liquidated. To David, he was an obstacle, an old man who was stubbornly refusing to die fast enough. To Sarah, he was a problem to be managed, a resource to be converted into cash and comfort. Neither one saw him as a person anymore, as their father, as someone who'd loved them with everything he had. He thought about Margaret, about the last thing she'd said to him before the cancer finally took her. "Promise me you'll be okay." She'd whispered, her hand weak in his. "Promise me you won't be alone. You've got the kids. They'll take care of you." He'd promised. He'd believed it. But Margaret had been wrong. Still, 2 weeks earlier, Oak Valley, the night after Sarah's call. Robert hadn't slept. He'd sat in his workshop behind the house, surrounded by half-finished projects and sawdust and the smell of wood that had always brought him comfort. On the workbench in front of him sat a wooden horse, small, meant for a child. He'd started carving it 3 years ago, when Sarah had mentioned she and her husband were thinking about having kids. They'd never had any. Robert had kept carving anyway, hoping. The horse was almost done, just needed sanding and a coat of finish. A child would love it, he thought. A child would run their fingers over the smooth wood and make galloping sounds and give it a name. But there was no child. There would be no child. Sarah didn't visit. David didn't call except to check if he was dead yet. Robert picked up the horse and ran his thumb over the rough spots. 40 years of woodworking had taught him how to see the potential in a piece of wood, how to bring out its natural beauty, how to create something meaningful from raw material. He'd thought he could do the same with his life. Work hard, provide for his family, sacrifice when necessary, shape a good life out of rough circumstances. He'd worked 2 jobs when the kids were young, had wanted to be an architect, had even gotten accepted to a good program, but then Margaret got pregnant with David, and they'd needed the money. So he'd taken a job at the hardware store and another one doing carpentry on weekends. He'd watched his classmates become architects, designers building beautiful things. He'd built birdhouses and fixed porches and sold hammers. But it was worth it, he'd told himself, because he was providing for his family, because David would go to college, the college Robert never got to attend, because Sarah would have opportunities Robert had given up for her. That was love, wasn't it? Sacrifice. Giving up what you wanted so the people you loved could have more. He'd sold his beloved Chevy truck, the one thing he'd ever owned that was truly his, to pay for David's senior year tuition. He'd worked through Margaret's illness, taking extra shifts to pay for treatments insurance didn't cover, even though every minute away from her bedside had felt like abandonment. He'd given everything. Everything. And for what? So his children could sit in their comfortable lives, waiting for him to die, calculating how much his death would be worth to them. Robert set down the wooden horse and put his head in his hands. "What did I do wrong, Margaret?" he whispered into the empty workshop. "What did I do wrong?" The workshop, like always, didn't answer. He thought about calling them back, confronting them, telling them he'd heard everything, that he knew exactly what they thought of him. But what would that accomplish? They'd deny it, make excuses, say he'd misunderstood, that he was being paranoid, that age was making him confused. Or worse, they'd admit it. They'd tell him to his face that yes, they were waiting for him to die, and wasn't that just the natural order of things? No, he couldn't face that. Couldn't bear to hear them say it out loud. Robert stood up slowly, his joints protesting. He walked through the dark house, through rooms filled with furniture nobody sat on, and photographs nobody looked at. In the bedroom, he pulled out a suitcase from the closet, an old one beaten up from years of use. Margaret's handwriting was still on the tag, Robert and Margaret Miller, 1970, the last vacation they'd taken before the kids were born. He packed slowly, a few changes of clothes, his medication, the photo of Margaret from their wedding day, and at the last minute, the wooden horse. Maybe he'd find a child who'd want it, someone who'd appreciate it. At 4 a.m, he sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a note on a piece of lined paper. "I'm safe. I need some time away. Don't worry." He almost wrote, "I love you," but the words stuck in his throat. Did he still love them after everything he didn't know? He was too tired to figure it out. Robert left the note on the kitchen table, weighted down with the salt shaker. Then he picked up his suitcase, put on his thin coat, and walked out the door. He didn't look back. The bus station was 2 miles away. He walked the whole distance, his breath white in the cold December air. His chest ached, but he ignored it. At the station, he bought a ticket to Pinehurst, a town he'd never heard of, 200 miles away. The clerk had looked at him strangely. "You got people in Pinehurst?" the clerk asked. "No," Robert said. "That's why I'm going." The bus ride took 4 hours. Robert sat in the back, watching the landscape slide by, fields and farms and small towns that looked exactly like Oak Valley. Towns where people probably had families who loved them. Towns where fathers didn't die alone and unmourned. When the bus pulled into Pinehurst, it was already getting dark. The station was just a small shelter with 2 benches. The town itself looked like it had maybe 1,000 people, if that. Robert got off the bus with his suitcase and stood there unsure what to do next. A woman walking by saw him and stopped. "You need help finding something, hun. Is there a motel nearby?" She shook her head. "Nearest one's about 15 miles up Highway 9. You'd need a car." "Oh." Robert looked around at the darkening streets. "Thank you anyway." She hesitated like she wanted to say something else, then hurried on. Robert started walking. He didn't know where he was going, just away. Away from the bus station. Away from that led back to Oak Valley. Away from the life he'd thought he was living. The town ended quickly. Soon he was on a country road, fields on either side, the temperature dropping fast. His chest started to hurt worse. Robert pressed his hand against it, willing the pain to stop. Just a little further. Just a little more. The snow started falling around 8 o'clock. Big, fat flakes that quickly covered the ground. Robert kept walking. His coat was soaked through. His fingers had gone numb. Each breath came harder than the last. "This is stupid," part of his mind said. "Turn back. Find help." but a larger part, the part that had heard his children's words, that had understood how completely alone he was, said, "What's the point? Better to end it here. Quickly, cleanly. No more hospitals, no more sitting in an empty house waiting for children who would never come. Just quiet and cold. And then nothing." The pain in his chest exploded sharp and sudden. Robert gasped, stumbling. His suitcase fell from his hand. He tried to take another step, but his legs wouldn't work. The ground tilted sideways. Then he was falling snow rushing up to meet him, and the last thing he thought before darkness took him was, "I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm so sorry." Robert opened his eyes and found himself back in the Thompson living room, tears streaming down his face. He'd been crying in his sleep, he realized. The pillows were damp. He sat up slowly, wiping his face with shaking hands. The house was quiet. He checked the clock on the wall, 3 in the morning. He should try to sleep again, but he knew he couldn't. Not now. Not with all those memories churning inside him like broken glass. A light clicked on in the hallway. Emma appeared wrapped in a bathrobe, her hair messy from sleep. "I heard you crying," she said gently. "Are you okay? Is it your chest?" "No, I'm fine. Physically. I'm sorry I woke you." Emma came and sat down on the coffee table just like she had earlier. "You want to talk about it? It's late. You should go back to bed." "Mr. Miller." She looked at him steadily. "I'm a nurse. I've worked night shifts for 10 years. 3 a.m. is nothing to me." She paused. "And something tells me you've been carrying this alone for too long." Robert looked at her. This stranger who'd saved his life, who'd brought him into her home, who was sitting here in the middle of the night, offering to listen. When was the last time someone had offered to listen to him, really listen, not just wait for their turn to talk? "I have children," he heard himself say. 2 of them, a son and a daughter. Emma nodded, waiting. And then it all came pouring out. The whole story. Margaret's death. The years alone. The heart attack. The phone calls. Every terrible word he'd overheard, every moment of realization that he'd become nothing but a burden, an obstacle, a paycheck waiting to be cashed. Emma listened without interrupting. Her face didn't show pity or judgment, just quiet attention. When Robert finished, his throat was raw and his eyes were burning. "I worked so hard," he whispered. "I gave up everything. My dreams, my plans, everything. I thought if I just loved them enough, sacrificed enough, it would matter. They'd see it. They'd appreciate it." "Oh, Mr. Miller," Emma said softly, "but I was invisible to them. I'm just this old man who won't die fast enough. This obstacle between them and money." He laughed, but it came out bitter. 7 years. 7 years I sat in that house and they couldn't even visit for a weekend." "That's on them," Emma said firmly, "not you. Is it? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I failed as a father somehow." "No." Emma's voice cut through sharp and clear. "You listen to me. You're not a burden. You're not an obstacle. You're a person. A good person who loved his kids the best way he knew how. What they chose to do with that love, how they chose to respond, that's their failure, not yours." Robert shook his head. "You don't understand. They're all I have. Without them—" "You're wrong." Emma reached out and took his hand. "You're not alone. Not anymore. Not here." Footsteps sounded in the hall. James appeared, followed by Tommy and Lucy, both rubbing their eyes. "We heard voices," James said. "Everything okay?" Lucy ran over and climbed onto the couch next to Robert, curling up against his side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're sad," she said, looking up at him with those big, serious eyes. "Did you have a bad dream?" "Something like that," Robert managed. "When I have bad dreams, Mama says I should talk about them. It makes them smaller." Tommy sat down on Robert's other side, quiet but present. James pulled up a chair, and Emma stayed where she was. "Mr. Miller was telling me about his children," Emma said gently. "You have kids." Tommy looked surprised. "Where are they?" "Far away," Robert said. They have their own lives." "Don't they miss you?" Lucy asked. The question was so simple, so innocent, it nearly broke him. "I don't think so, sweetheart." "That's stupid," Lucy declared. "If you were my grandpa, I'd miss you every day." "Lucy," James said quietly, but there was no real reproach in his voice. "Well, I would." Lucy hugged Robert's arm. "You're nice. You're sad, but you're nice. And you smell like wood. Like Daddy." Robert let out a shaky breath that was half laugh, half sob. "You know what I think." James leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I think family isn't always about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays when things get hard, who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stick around. Your kids made a choice, Emma added, a selfish one, a cruel one. But that doesn't define you. It defines them. You're not a burden, Mr. Miller. James's voice was steady. You're a gift. You're alive. You survived. You're here. And if you want to stay here with us for as long as you need, you're welcome. Robert looked around at them. This family he'd known for less than 2 days. These people who owed him nothing, who'd gained nothing from saving him, except maybe some trouble and extra expenses. They were looking back at him with something he hadn't seen in 7 years. They were looking at him like he mattered. Robert's voice cracked. I don't deserve this. Yes, you do, Emma said firmly. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be cared for, to matter to someone. Lucy snuggled closer. Stay with us. Please, we have space. Mama said so. The couch pulls out into a bed, Tommy added helpfully. It's actually pretty comfortable. Robert looked at James, waiting for the man to override his family to explain that they were just being polite. But James just smiled. What do you say, Mr. Miller? Want to stick around for a while? And Robert, who'd walked into a snowstorm ready to die, who'd given up on everything and everyone, found himself nodding. If you're sure, he whispered. We're sure, Emma said. Lucy cheered softly, and Tommy grinned, and James reached out to shake Robert's hand again, a promise sealed. For the first time in 7 years, Robert Miller didn't feel alone. 3 days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. Robert kept thinking he should leave, should stop imposing, should go somewhere. But every time he mentioned it, the Thompsons would find a reason for him to stay a little longer. Just until you're stronger, Emma would say. I'm teaching you my chili recipe tonight, James would add. But you promised to help me with my science project, Lucy would protest. And somehow, Robert kept staying. He made himself useful, helped with dishes, folded laundry, swept the floors, small things, but they made him feel less like a burden. One afternoon, James found him examining the wobbly kitchen table. It's the leg, Robert said, running his hand over the joint. It's come loose. You need to tighten it properly, or it'll just keep wobbling. I know, James sighed. I've been meaning to fix it for months, but between work and the kids, I could fix it. If you have tools. James's face lit up. You know woodworking. I was a carpenter for 40 years. No kidding. James looked excited now. I've got a workshop out in the garage. Nothing fancy, but it's got the basics. You want to take a look? The workshop was small but well organized. A solid workbench, good lighting tools hung neatly on pegboards. It reminded Robert painfully of his own workshop back home. This is nice, Robert said, running his hand over the workbench. Really nice. Thanks. I do finish carpentry, mostly cabinets, trim, work, that kind of thing. But I've always wanted to learn more. Traditional joinery, furniture making. James looked almost embarrassed. Never had anyone to teach me. An idea sparked in Robert's mind. I could show you, if you want. Seriously? I'd like to. I miss it. That afternoon, they fixed the kitchen table together. Robert showed James how to properly drill out the old joint, apply fresh glue, and clamp it correctly. Tommy wandered out to watch. What are you guys doing? Fixing the table, James said. Mr. Miller's teaching me the right way to do it. Can I help? Robert hesitated. The boy was only 9, but then he remembered teaching David at that age, how excited his son had been to use real tools. He pushed the memory away. Sure, Robert said. You can help me sand this piece. Lucy appeared minutes later, not wanting to be left out. Soon all 4 of them were crowded around the table working together. I want to make something, Lucy announced. Something all my own. Like what? Robert asked. A horse, a toy horse I can play with. Robert's breath caught. The wooden horse, the one sitting in his suitcase, still unfinished. I actually have one started. It's not done yet, but maybe we could finish it together. Lucy's eyes went huge. Really? Robert went to get the horse from his suitcase. When he came back, both kids crowded around to see. It's beautiful, Tommy breathed. You made this by hand. Not finished yet. Needs sanding and staining. But yes. Can you teach me how to make one? Tommy asked. And just like that, Robert found himself with 2 eager students. Over the next weeks, the garage workshop became their gathering place. After school, Tommy and Lucy would burst through the door, calling for Mr. Robert, as they'd started calling him, ready to learn. Robert taught them how to read wood grain, how to use sandpaper properly always with the grain, never against how to tell when a piece was smooth enough just by touch. He showed Tommy how to use a coping saw, safely guiding the boys' hands as they cut out the rough shape of a horse. He taught Lucy how to use files and rasps to shape the wood, refining the curves and edges. James worked alongside them, asking questions, taking notes. At night, after the kids went to bed, he and Robert would stay up late, talking about joinery techniques, wood selection, the difference between oil and polyurethane finishes. "You should have been a teacher," James said one night. "I was too busy working to pay bills," Robert replied, but there was no bitterness in his voice. Not anymore. The day Tommy finished his first wooden horse, rough and a bit lopsided, but unmistakably a horse, Robert felt something in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride. "Look, Mom." Tommy ran into the kitchen holding up his creation. "I made it, Mr. Robert taught me." Emma examined it seriously. "This is incredible, Tommy. Really beautiful work. Can I make another one for Lucy?" "Of course," Robert said. "We'll start tomorrow." Lucy finished her horse a week later. It was smaller than Tommy's, more delicate, the mane and tail carved with extra care. "Thank you, Mr. Robert," she said, hugging the horse to her chest. Then she looked up at him. "Thank you, Grandpa Robert." The word hit him like a physical blow. "Grandpa." "Lucy, honey, you don't have to." Emma started, but Robert held up a hand. "It's okay," he said, his voice rough. He knelt down to Lucy's level, ignoring his protesting knees. "You can call me that, if you want to." "I do want to." Lucy threw her arms around his neck. "You're teaching me stuff, and you tell good stories, and you don't get mad when I mess up, and you're here, and you're nice, and I love you." Robert hugged her back, this little girl he'd known for a month, and felt tears running down his face. "I love you too, sweetheart," he whispered. Tommy appeared beside them, looking hopeful. "Can I call you Grandpa too?" "Yes," Robert managed. "Yes, you can." That night, Emma found him in the workshop, staring at the 3 wooden horses lined up on the bench, the one he'd brought Tommy's and Lucy's. "You okay?" she asked. "My real grandchildren," Robert said slowly. "The ones I'm actually related to. I've never met them. Sarah said they were too busy to visit. David's wife didn't want the trip." Emma stood beside him, not touching, just present. 3 wooden horses, Robert continued. "I made the first one for grandchildren I'd never see. Tommy made the second one to learn something new. Lucy made the third one because she wanted to create something beautiful." He turned to look at Emma. "Which one matters more?" "They all matter," Emma said gently. "But only 2 of them are going to be played with and loved and cherished. Only 2 of them will have stories attached. Only 2 will mean something." Robert nodded slowly. "I spent 40 years building my life around people who didn't want to be there. These kids, they choose to be here. They choose to listen. They choose to care." "That's the difference between obligation and love," Emma said. "One is forced. The other is freely given." "I don't want to overstep," Robert said quietly. "They're your children, not mine. But they're calling me Grandpa, and You love them." "Yes. And they love you. I see it every day." Emma smiled. "Mr. Miller, Robert, you're not overstepping. You're exactly where you belong." Later that night, Robert tried once more to give them money. He'd noticed the refrigerator was running loud, that Tommy needed new shoes, that the bills on the counter kept piling up. He slipped $500 into Emma's purse when he thought no one was looking. The next morning, she handed it back. "No," she said firmly, "but I want to help. You've done so much. And you think paying us turns this into something else, into a transaction?" Emma shook her head. "Robert, you're not staying here because you're paying rent. You're staying here because you're part of this family. If you pay us, you make it about money. And it's not about money." "Then what is it about?" "Love. Just love. Is that so hard to accept?" Robert looked at her. This woman he'd known for a month, who'd taught him more about family than his own children ever had. "Yes," he admitted, "it is. I'm not used to love that doesn't come with conditions." "Then get used to it," Emma said and hugged him. That afternoon, Tommy asked shyly, "Grandpa Robert, will you stay like forever?" Robert opened his mouth to say he couldn't make that promise, that life was complicated, but Lucy grabbed his hand and said, "Please, we have room. Mama said we could make the den into your bedroom if you want. A real bedroom, not just the couch." Robert looked at James, expecting him to gently redirect the kids. James just shrugged. "Ball's in your court, Robert. We'd love to have you. No pressure. But the offer stands." And Robert, who'd walked into the snow ready to die, who'd spent 7 years believing he didn't matter to anyone, found himself saying, "I'd like that, if you're really sure. The kids cheered. Emma beamed. James reached out and shook his hand. "Welcome home, Dad," James said. Dad. Robert had to sit down, his legs suddenly weak. He had children who called him Dad but didn't mean it, and now he had a son who wasn't his blood but said it like a promise. Maybe Robert thought family wasn't about who raised you. Maybe it was about who chose to keep you. 2 months passed. Robert officially moved into the den, which James and Tommy helped him paint a warm beige. Emma sewed curtains. Lucy made him a welcome home sign decorated with crayon horses. He'd never been happier. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, a police car pulled up in front of the Thompson house. Robert was in the workshop with Tommy, teaching him how to use a wood plane when Emma appeared in the doorway. "Robert," she said, and her voice was tight, "there are police here, and 2 people who say they're your children." The wood plane slipped from Robert's fingers, clattering onto the workbench. "What?" "They filed a missing person report. The police tracked you here." Robert's heart started hammering. I should." "You don't have to see them," James said, appearing behind Emma. "You're a grown man. You can make your own choices." "Hide, Grandpa." Tommy whispered, his eyes wide with worry. But Robert shook his head. "No, I've been hiding long enough." He walked to the front door on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. James and Emma flanked him, a united front. On the porch stood 2 police officers and 2 people Robert hadn't seen in 3 years. David looked exactly the same: expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive haircut. His face was arranged in an expression of concern that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah stood beside him in a designer coat, her makeup perfect, her smile brittle. "Dad," David stepped forward, "thank God. We've been so worried. When we got your note—" "I said I was safe," Robert interrupted. "That's all the note said." "Yes, but Dad, you've been gone for 2 months." Sarah's voice was high-strained. "Anything could have happened. We had to get the police involved." One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, are you here of your own free will?" "Yes." "Has anyone coerced you or forced you to stay?" "No, the Thompsons saved my life. I'm staying with them by choice." The officer nodded, making notes. "Are you being well cared for?" Robert looked back at James and Emma, at Tommy peeking around the corner, at Lucy clutching her mother's hand. "Better than I've been cared for in 7 years," he said clearly. David's expression flickered. Just for a second, Robert saw irritation flash across his face. Then the concern slid back into place. "Dad, that's wonderful, but you need proper care. Medical supervision. You had a heart attack. Emma is a nurse." "A random nurse you just met," Sarah cut in. Her voice was sharp now, the pretense dropping. "Dad, you can't just move in with strangers. It's not safe. It's not appropriate. What do these people want from you?" "They want nothing from me," Robert said, and his voice was steady. "That's the point. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." David turned to James and Emma with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "I'm sure you're lovely people, but my father is elderly, recovering from a serious medical event. He belongs with family." "I am with family," Robert said. David's smile froze. "Dad, where were you?" Robert's voice rose. "When I was in the hospital for a month, where were you? When I was discharged to an empty house with no one to help me, where were you?" "We were busy, Dad. We have lives." "I heard you, David." The words came out quiet but clear. "On the phone. I heard what you said about me." David went pale. "I don't know what you—" "The old man's too stubborn to die. That's what you said. You were disappointed the heart attack didn't kill me because it would have been easier." Sarah gasped. David's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "You too, Sarah. That property isn't doing anyone any good. Like I was just sitting on an asset you deserved." "Dad, if you heard something out of context—" "There is no context," Robert said, and he was surprised by how calm he felt, how clear. "You made your position clear. I was an obstacle, an inconvenience, something to be managed until I died and you could collect." "That's not fair." Sarah's voice cracked. "We love you." "Do you?" Robert looked at her. "When's the last time you really visited, not just called to ask about the land?" Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. 4 years, Robert said. 4 years, Sarah. Tommy's been in my life for 2 months, and he knows me better than you do." "Because you're replacing us." David's voice rose, finally showing real emotion, anger. "You're letting these people manipulate you, turn you against your real family. They didn't have to turn me against you. You did that yourselves." James stepped forward. "I think you should leave." "Excuse me." David turned on him. "This is my father. This is my home, and you're upsetting him. You're upsetting my kids. So, unless you have something constructive to say, you need to go." The police officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller appears to be competent, and here by choice. Unless there's evidence of elder abuse—" "There isn't," Robert said firmly. "Then I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do. Mr. Miller has the right to live where he chooses." The officer tipped his hat. "Sir, folks." He walked back to the patrol car, his partner following. David stared at Robert, his face red with anger, and something that might have been shame. "You're making a mistake, Dad." "No, the mistake was thinking you cared about me as a person instead of a paycheck." "We'll contest this," Sarah said, her voice cold now. "If you're not in your right mind, if these people are influencing you, contest what I haven't died yet." No will to read. Robert felt something like pity stir in his chest. "Go home, Sarah. Live your life. Just stop pretending I'm part of it." "Dad, I forgive you," Robert said quietly. "Both of you. I forgive you for not being what I needed, for not seeing me, for waiting for me to die." He took a breath. "But I don't need your permission to be happy, and I don't need your version of love anymore." He turned and walked back into the house. James and Emma followed, closing the door firmly behind them. Through the window, Robert watched David and Sarah stand on the sidewalk arguing. Finally, they got into an expensive sedan and drove away. Lucy ran to Robert and hugged his legs. "They were mean, Grandpa." "I know, sweetheart. Are you sad?" Robert thought about it. Was he sad his children, his blood children, had just left, maybe forever? But Tommy was hovering nearby, worried. Emma was making tea in the kitchen. James was already talking about ordering pizza for dinner to cheer everyone up. "No," Robert said, surprised to realize it was true. "I'm not sad." That night, Robert sat down at the kitchen table with paper and pen. He wrote for hours, updating his will. 70% of his assets would go to establishing a fund, the Robert Miller Foundation, dedicated to helping elderly people who'd been abandoned by their families. Money for housing, medical care, companionship programs. 30% would go to the Thompsons. When he finished, he felt lighter than he had in years. He wasn't defined by his children's cruelty. He was defined by how he chose to respond to it. And he chose love. Real love. The kind that was freely given and freely received. The kind he'd found in a small house in Pinehurst with a family that chose him when they didn't have to. Robert Miller lived with the Thompson family for 3 more years. 3 years that felt fuller than the previous 76 combined. He taught Tommy advanced woodworking dovetail joints, mortise and tenon, how to read plans and create beautiful furniture from raw lumber. By the time Tommy was 12, he could build a bookshelf that would last generations. He taught Lucy too, though her interests ran more toward the artistic. She learned to carve decorative elements, to see the beauty in wood grain, to create small sculptures of animals and flowers that she gave as gifts to friends. Robert helped James expand the workshop, adding better tools and more space. Together they took on bigger projects, custom cabinets for clients, furniture commissions, a beautiful dining table they built for a local restaurant. Every night Robert told the kids stories. Some were from his childhood, some from the years with Margaret, some he made up on the spot. Lucy started writing them down, illustrating them with careful drawings. They celebrated birthdays together, Robert's 77th, 78th, 79th. The Thompsons made him cakes and gave him gifts, usually tools or wood, because they knew what he loved. He taught Emma how to build a raised garden bed, and together they grew tomatoes and peppers and Margaret's favorite roses, transplanted from seeds Robert had saved. When Tommy graduated from middle school, Robert was in the front row cheering louder than anyone. When Lucy won the school art competition with a carved wooden sculpture of a family of horses, Robert framed the ribbon and hung it in his room. He had hard days, days when his heart acted up and Emma had to monitor him closely. Days when he thought about Oak Valley and Margaret and the children he'd raised who'd never really known him. But mostly, he had good days. Days that smelled like sawdust and Emma's cooking. Days filled with Lucy's laughter and Tommy's questions and James's terrible jokes. Days where he mattered, where he was seen, where he was loved without conditions or calculations. In the spring of his 3rd year with the Thompsons, Robert's health began to decline more noticeably. His heart was giving out, finally truly giving out. Emma wanted him to go to the hospital, but Robert refused. "I'm not dying in some sterile room with machines beeping," he said firmly. "I'm dying here, at home, with my family." James set up a bed in the living room so Robert wouldn't have to manage the stairs to the den. The The kids helped decorate the space with his favorite things, photos of Margaret, the 3 wooden horses, Lucy's drawings. On a Tuesday evening in May, Robert knew it was time. He could feel it in his chest, in the way his breath came shorter, in the strange peace that settled over him. Emma sat on one side of the bed, James on the other, each holding one of his hands. Tommy and Lucy sat at the foot of the bed, quiet and solemn, understanding, without being told. "Thank you," Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for showing me what family really is." "We love you, Dad," James said, tears streaming down his face. "We love you, Grandpa," Lucy added, her voice breaking. Robert smiled. He'd lived 79 years. He'd made mistakes. He'd been hurt. He'd hurt others. He'd lost people he loved and been betrayed by people he trusted, but in the end, he'd found this: love that was freely given, family that was chosen, a home that was real. "I'm not afraid," he said. "I'm going to see Margaret. I'm going to tell her. Tell her I finally understand. Love isn't about blood, it's about choice." Emma squeezed his hand. "We chose you. Every day we chose you." "And I chose you," Robert whispered. "Best choice I ever made." His eyes drifted closed, his breathing slowed, and surrounded by the people who loved him, really truly loved him. Robert Miller let go. The funeral was held on a Saturday. More than 200 people came. Neighbors who'd watched Robert help the Thompsons fix their roof. People from James's carpentry business who'd met Mr. Robert and heard his stories. Teachers from the kids' school. Elderly people from around town who'd heard about the kind old man living with the Thompson family and had felt less alone knowing someone like them had found a home. David and Sarah didn't come. Instead, a week later, they sent a lawyer with a court filing. They were contesting the will, claiming Robert had been manipulated, that he wasn't of sound mind, that the Thompsons had taken advantage of an elderly, vulnerable man. The case was straightforward. Robert's lawyer presented medical records showing Robert had been fully competent. Character witnesses testified to his state of mind. The judge reviewed the evidence and dismissed the case in less than an hour. Mr. Miller had every right to leave his estate to whomever he chose, the judge said, and based on the evidence presented, he chose people who loved him. Case dismissed. David and Sarah received one thing from Robert's estate, a wooden box beautifully made with their names carved on the lid. Inside was a photo from when they were children, all 4 of them. Robert, Margaret, David, and Sarah at the lake laughing, happy. And a letter, "David and Sarah, I forgive you. I need you to know that. I spent a long time being angry, feeling betrayed, wondering what I did wrong. But in the end, I realized I didn't do anything wrong. I loved you the best way I knew how. What you chose to do with that love was your decision, not my failure. I hope you find happiness. I hope you find love, real love, not the transactional kind. I hope you wake up one day and understand what you lost, not the money or the land, but the relationship, the time, the connection. I spent my last 3 years with a family that chose me when they didn't have to. They taught me that love isn't about obligation or blood. It's about showing up, seeing people, staying. I wish you had stayed. I would have chosen you if you'd chosen me, but you didn't. So I chose a different family, and I was happy. I hope you find that kind of happiness someday." Dad Sarah read the letter alone in her expensive apartment and cried for 3 hours. David read it in his office and had to cancel his afternoon meetings. Neither one of them ever forgot it. The Robert Miller Foundation opened 6 months after his death. Emma and James ran it part-time with help from volunteers. In the first year, they helped 43 elderly people who'd been abandoned by their families. Some received financial assistance. Some got help finding new living situations. Some were connected with younger families willing to adopt a grandparent. The foundation grew. By the 5th year, they'd helped over 1,000 people. Tommy, now 15, started a woodworking program through the foundation. He taught elderly men and women how to work with wood, how to create beautiful things, how to find purpose and meaning in craftsmanship. "My grandpa taught me," he'd tell each new student. "Now I'm teaching you. That's how it works. We pass it on." Lucy, now 13, volunteered every week. She'd visit with elderly people, bring them her drawings, listen to their stories, and make them feel seen. "My grandpa used to say, 'Everyone has a story worth hearing,'" she'd tell them. "So I'm listening." In the Thompson home, Robert's room remained mostly unchanged. His tools hung in the workshop, used regularly by Tommy and James. His favorite chair sat by the window. The 3 wooden horses, his Tommy's and Lucy's, sat on the mantel. On the anniversary of his death each year, the family gathered at his grave. They brought flowers, roses like Margaret used to grow, and told stories. Remember when Grandpa tried to teach Mom how to use the bandsaw? Tommy would laugh. Remember how he always fell asleep during movie night? Lucy would add. Remember how he made everything feel possible? Emma would say quietly. And James would finish. Remember how he taught us that family is who you choose to love? 10 years after Robert's death, Tommy opened his own woodworking school. He offered free classes to foster kids and at-risk youth, teaching them the skills his grandpa had taught him. Above his workbench hung a sign, "Love isn't about blood, it's about who shows up." Robert Miller. Lucy became an artist. She painted and drew and sculpted, and every piece she sold, she donated a portion to the Robert Miller Foundation. In her studio hung 156 portraits, every single one she'd drawn of her grandfather during those 3 years. They covered an entire wall, a testament to a man who'd been invisible to his own children, but unforgettable to a little girl who'd chosen to see him. Sarah tried to reconnect once 12 years later. She sent a letter to the Thompson family asking about her father, asking if they had any photos or stories they might share. Emma wrote back, "Dear Sarah, your father was a remarkable man. He was kind, patient, talented, and loving. He taught my children woodworking and gave them a grandfather's love when they needed it most. He also taught them and me that love is a choice we make every day. To see people, to show up, to stay. I have photos and stories, many of them, but they're not mine to give you. They belong to him, and he chose to share them with us. You had 76 years to make memories with him. We had 3. We made them count." Respectfully, Emma Thompson Sarah never wrote back. David died at 61, wealthy and successful and alone. His obituary was short, professional, listing his business accomplishments and his net worth. No one mentioned that he had a father who'd loved him, who'd sacrificed everything for him, who'd wanted nothing more than to be seen. But Robert Miller's obituary, written by Tommy and Lucy together, told a different story. Robert Miller, beloved grandfather and friend, passed away peacefully, surrounded by family. He taught us that family isn't about blood, it's about who chooses to love you and who you choose to love in return. He believed every person deserves to be seen, to matter, to belong. He lived that belief every day. He is survived by the Thompson family, by hundreds of people, helped through his foundation, and by every person who learned that love given freely is the most powerful force in the world. His legacy isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in changed lives, in woodworking students who found purpose, in elderly people who found belonging, in children who learned that kindness matters more than blood. Robert Miller mattered. He was seen. He was loved. And his love continues passed on from person to person, growing bigger every day. 25 years after his death, the Robert Miller Foundation had helped over 10,000 people. Tommy's woodworking school had trained 500 students. Lucy's art had raised over $1 million for charity. And in a small house in Pinehurst, a new family had moved in. The Thompson family, now grown, had kept the house and rented it to a young couple with 2 children. In the workshop, the new father was teaching his son to build a wooden horse, using tools that had once belonged to Robert Miller, techniques passed down through Tommy. "Who taught you this, Dad?" the boy asked. "A man named Robert Miller. I never met him, but my teacher learned from him. And now I'm teaching you. That's how love works, son. It doesn't die when people do. It just keeps going, moving from person to person, growing bigger every time someone chooses to pass it on." The boy ran his fingers over the smooth wood, feeling the grain. "Will you tell me about Robert Miller?" he asked. "I will," his father said. "I'll tell you about a man who learned that love isn't about who you're related to. It's about who shows up, who sees you, who stays." And somewhere in whatever comes after, Robert Miller smiled, because he'd learned finally the truth that had eluded him for so long. You don't have to be born into a family to belong. You just have to be chosen and choose back. That's all love is. Just choosing every day, over and over, until the end and even after. Because real love, the kind built on choice, not obligation, never really dies. It just transforms, spreads, grows, and touches people you'll never meet in ways you'll never know long after you're gone. That's the legacy worth leaving. Not money, not land, not blood, just love. Simple, profound, eternal love.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.